be able to see. I'm not going to be able to see those of you on Zoom, but has anybody here ever seen the TV show Good Omens or heard about it? It's a 6-part, very clever series that presents the end of the world, also known as the apocalypse, as a big mistake. In the story, the good angel, Aziraphale, is actually friends with the representative of Satan on earth, the demon Crawley, who is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, but who travels through the millennia looking like a rock star. And in the opening series, we see the two of them wondering about God's seemingly over-the-top reaction to Adam and Eve eating the apple and being thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Isn't wisdom, Crawley asks Aziraphale, a good thing? Aziraphale, who is a principality type of angel, is so upset by the expulsion that he gives his flaming sword to Adam so he can fight off the lion that immediately begins stalking the exiled couple after they leave the garden. So then the series fast forwards to the present, where Crawley receives a message that the great day is coming. It's time for the Antichrist and Armageddon. And so the two angels bicker between themselves about the end of the world, with Aziraphale arguing that, of course, the good side has to win and the Antichrist will be defeated. After all, isn't God always on the side of the good? But Crawley, the allegedly bad angel, says that in order for that to happen, the world has to end and these people have to be killed and the world would be destroyed, and the world they had really come to enjoy in their own particular way. Deciding that the world was worthy of being saved, the two of them, the good angel and the bad angel, they plot to stop Armageddon. Aziraphale's bosses, Gabriel and the other archangels, who were portrayed as suits working in sterile offices, are perfectly happy to have the world end in spite of this terrible loss of life and what looks like to the two angels in question as mindless destruction. And the archangels are mindless bureaucrats, following what they believe are the rules. It's just the way things are. It's just God's will, as is often said. And rather than being upset by the coming war between heaven and hell and the collateral damage that it will cause, Gabriel comments on Aziraphale's appetite for sushi and says he would not defile his perfect body with such a meal. God is the voice of Frances McDormand, who's now my favorite actress, who plays cards while she's narrating the story. It's a very funny and very clever show, and terribly upset 20,000 people who lobbied Netflix to prevent the show from airing because of its allegedly disrespectful treatment of God and what appeared to them to be the elevation of evil. And the signers, believe it or not, or I'm sure you would be willing to believe it, were terribly upset that God was portrayed as a woman. But their effort had no effect because the show wasn't on Netflix, it was on Amazon. So God really does work in mysterious ways. So the entire Antichrist episode is a comedy of error. The baby Antichrist is accidentally placed in a loving home instead of in the home of the United States ambassador as planned, and grows up to be a normal child, a testimony to nurture rather than nature. And when the hellhound is unleashed by Satan upon the Antichrist's 11th birthday, the child names him dog instead of something horrible like killer or devil. And that immediately tames the beast and makes him into a friendly little puppy. And the Antichrist is not the least bit interested in ending the world. In fact, he's much more interested in saving the world, like Greta Thunberg, he along with his little group of friends. This series gently and humorously points out the presence and coexistence of both evil and good in what is truly a wonderful world in spite of all of its warts. So good people can be best friends with bad people, and good intentions can be plenty bad and lead to evil. In fact, we all know that the road to hell is paved with all those good intentions. Motives are not always spotless or inherently evil. And as Crawley said to his friend about his own fall from grace, he says, "I didn't fall, I sauntered vaguely downward." And in spite of that vague saunter, Crawley remained loyal to his friends for 6,000 years, saving him from many a mishap in spite of the threat of punishment from hell, which is portrayed as a damp and dismal basement office with leaky pipes and endless piles of paper that goes nowhere. Does that office sound familiar to anybody? Sounds like my office in the school district. The two characters gently and humorously dismantle so many important issues that run contrary to the monoliths of so many organized religious faiths. Crime and the need for punishment, the ongoing fight for a very clearly demarcated good and evil, light and darkness, heaven and hell. In the world of Crowley and Aziraphale, institutions are indeed good, but they are also bad. And they can be redeemed by prophets from the edge who see the things of God in the hearts of those who are supposed to be their enemy. Prophets who know that Jesus came to save the world, not to end it violently in yet another world war, even if that war has the word holy affixed to it. So why do I give you this rundown of this very funny series? And I highly recommend that you watch it. I did because I found Paul's second letter to the Corinthians that we read today to basically be off base and untrue. Paul, if you didn't know, firmly believed in the coming apocalypse. In fact, he promised his converts that the second coming would occur before the current generation had passed away. For Paul, the violence of the second coming was the only way to ensure justice, even if the world had to end and vast numbers of people were killed. The wheat needed to be separated from the chaff and the crops from the weeds. As John the Baptist promised, Jesus would have his winnowing fan in his right hand and lay it at the root, cutting off the good from the bad, because the world is a bad place and needs to be cleansed by the good guys for the good guys. Except, as Crowley and Aziraphale would ask, who are the good guys? Are the good guys the ones that send the hound of heaven or the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Or are they the archangels insisting upon the necessity of the apocalypse, an act Aziraphale said would make heaven have blood on its hands? Paul also said something else in the second reading that was incorrect and I think downright silly. And something that we know is untrue. He claimed that while we might be at home in the body, we are really away from Jesus, as if life on earth takes us away from God. The fact is that there is no separation between God and humanity. We don't leave God when we are born, and God never leaves us. While in our bodies, we are actually embodiments of God. God lives in us, and we live in God. We are God's eyes, we are God's ears, we are God's hands, and we are God's feet. While on earth, we walk in the light of God, casting it before us. We all shine with that divine light, and in death, we are absorbed into the light of God, the light that casts away all darkness. Like theology that is now done by a widening group of people who have different ways of looking at the world depending upon their place in it, Good Omens demonstrates that there are ways of looking at what appear to be precedents that seem to have existed since the beginning of time. And that's what upset the folks who protested the series so much. They actually like the punishment paradigm, and they anticipate Armageddon, where their enemies, not necessarily God, because God obviously has no enemies, or God would not be God. They anticipate their enemies being punished. But there are and always have been other stories that discount the need for violence and punishment to either effect change or to maintain the status quo. Our first reading and the gospel point to that other way. God is not a judge, a definer and refiner of good and evil, a destroyer or a warmonger. God made the crest of the cedar, a majestic tree where all the birds of all kinds can rest in peace and dwell beneath it. And the place that Jesus described as the kingdom of God, it is unimaginably huge, with room for everyone. When the seeds of acceptance, understanding, and tolerance are sown, they grow to unimaginable proportions and shelter the entire world, protecting it from harm instead of destroying it. And these, my friends, are the stories that need to be told over and over and over again. Of course, the powers never like these stories. They like the divide and conquer stories. They like to pit one group of people against another because it gives them cover to do their dark and dirty deeds. And this is why life-giving stories are so often rewritten as the first chapter in Genesis. The story of the original blessing is replaced by the second chapter of Genesis with the story of the Garden of Eden and the expulsion of Adam and Eve. Jesus's later followers replaced his roomy kingdom of God with the need for blind belief and punishment, the great judgment, the hound of heaven, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and of course, Antichrist, whoever that might be. But here at St. Mary Magdalene, as our entrance hymn shows everybody, we sing a new song and we tell a different story, a story where we don't choose sides, where we don't get hung up on labels and titles and the need for punishment. Instead, we try to be with folks to accompany them on their journey towards God's holy mountain and accept them where they are. It's why we feed and welcome everyone, because we think and believe that everyone is worthy of our love and acceptance. At the climax of Good Omens, it is clear that the 11-year-old boy, the Antichrist, has quite a bit of power, and we don't know exactly what he is going to do with it. The two angels, the allegedly good one and the allegedly bad one, hold the boy's hands, and they tell him that they will be with him when he makes his choice. And being with people, my friends, is about all we can do. To paraphrase the words of Emmett Rehoboth, we can't rescue people because they are not powerless. We can't fix people because they are not broken. We can't heal people, but we can be with them on their journey, and we can help them remember their own wholeness and their own shining light. And we can also raise our glasses, as the two angels did at the end of the series, and say, L'chaim, to life.